ago. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. 10 years ago, it was like, wow, there's a camera on a drone, and people's minds were just exploding.
Blown.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now
yeah.
it's like, well, there's six cameras on that drone. Right. And there's just so much more that can be done. And, as far as the automation of flight and these workflows and the data analysis, I mean, there's just so much more value that's occurred in such a brief amount of time.
Yeah.
The technology is quickly outpacing the regulatory framework. I mentioned it earlier too, some of those cultural hurdles as well, right? It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, how are we making sense of this, and how are we ensuring that the public feels, hey, we're protecting their privacy and we're respecting them, and kind of threading the needle a little bit throughout all of that stuff. So
It's
there's
funny.
a real balance there.
I was actually out flying earlier, and I got shouted at over the fence from where I was flying behind me. Safe road. I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to answer that because I can't even see who it is. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, the cultural change, it will happen. It is slowly happening already. People are becoming acceptant of,
And
flying kit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it takes time, but I think people are becoming more and more used to it for sure.
Yeah. And it's always the same questions as well. Is that a drone?
Is it a drone? No, it's a flying sock.
It's a flying ham sandwich. That's right.
Yeah, it's a flying ham sandwich, indeed. Hello, everyone. We are back for another podcast. This time, I've got Varun with me. Ooh,
I'm back.
He's back. He has returned, and we also we have a guest. Now, usually Varun isn't here for guests, but this week he is. We have a very special guest from Blue Nose Aerial in the USA, a fella called Tanner will be joining us shortly. He will just appear. We have no waiting room set up this time, so
yes,
he will dive on any minute. So, how's things with you, Varun? All good?
Things are good, Alex. Yeah, really good. This is going to be our Christmas special, isn't it? Because we are 1 week away from Christmas, or 1 week minus 1 day, I think.
Not even that, really, is it?
Yeah.
I was going to wear my Christmas hat. I've got a Christmas hat, but I totally forgot to bring it into the office.
Or a Christmas jumper, like the ugly Christmas jumper.
I'd have put it a bit like a Muppet if I'd have put my Christmas hat on, and probably fairly embarrassed.
What's the Christmas hat like?
It's just like a Santa hat.
Oh, okay.
Bit silly, but
right.
I've got a Santa hat and I've got an elf hat.
Okay.
Which my kids love. They love it when I put that on. I'm a bit of a Grinch, really, to be honest, when it comes to Christmas. I've asked them to buy me a black hat, but they won't do it. So I have to wear my Santa hat.
Right. I see. Well,
it's Christmas.
We've got I think we did a logo update for this season, so
I saw it. It looks great.
With the Santa
hat. Looks very festive.
Yes.
Which is wonderful. So we are literally just awaiting Mr. Tanner, who will be here very shortly. So Blue Nose Aerial is a franchise, I believe, in America.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. But I will let Tanner introduce it because he's probably the best person to do that.
I'm not going to talk about his business. He can discuss his business himself when he appears. As if by magic, here he is. So we'll just wait for him to connect. Any second now. And there he is.
Jeds, hello.
Hello, Tanner. How are you?
Very good. How are you, Alex?
Not too bad. Good to see you too. So welcome aboard. You are guest number.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is cool to be a part of the podcast.
You're guest number 3.
Yeah.
You are guest number 3.
Good company. I feel pretty good about that.
Good. So, Tanner, what are you all about, and what is Blue Nose Aerial? If you can describe what you do and what Blue Nose Aerial does, that'd be fantastic.
No, absolutely. Well, first of all, like I said, thanks so much for having me. This is a great opportunity. It's always good to reconnect with you guys, and I'm psyched for your podcast. You guys are doing some great stuff. So, we've really thoroughly enjoyed the partnership with Hammer Missions over the last, I guess we've known you guys for a couple of years now, I think, at this point, but it's been great. We're a drone services franchise based here in the United States. I am the franchisor, so I'm tasked with expanding the network and providing support and solutions for all of our franchise owners. A little bit of, just kind of a quick background about myself. I was a pilot with the U.S. Navy for about 10 years. And now I fly for the airlines out here in Colorado. And one of the things that we realized really from the outset of the pandemic was that a lot of those skills from a kind of a traditionally manned aviation background can be transferred into the unmanned or the uncrewed space really pretty easily. There's a lot of commonalities there, very transferable skill sets. So when the pandemic hit, and there were a lot of airline pilots who were potentially out on the streets, looking for work. Yeah. We had just recently set up Blue Nose Aerial Imaging here in Denver, Colorado. And had a few folks reach out to me that I'd flown with either in the airlines or in the military, and they were like, "Hey, how did you get into the drone space? What did you do? What were the steps that you took?" And so the more that we kind of thought about that, the more that we realized, well, gosh, there's a real need for it in the drone services space, especially here in the U.S. It's an emerging industry, and there's just there's a need for that type of standardized workflow, I think. And so the more that we kind of ran through those iterations and tried to figure out what it is that people are struggling with, the more that it became very clear that we could set up a franchise business model and help provide a lot of support for a number of folks to become successful entrepreneurs in this new and emerging unmanned world, right? So that's what we did. That's what we set up the Blue Nose Aerial Imaging franchise model, and our entire purpose is to expedite their business setup process, provide them with training, provide them with equipment, provide them with access to subject matter experts, and ultimately provide them with revenue opportunities as well, right? And that that's a heavy lift. It takes a while for all of that to come together, but we've been doing this for about coming up on 3 years here pretty soon. So it's been a blast. We work with some fantastic people, fantastic partners like Hammer Missions, and it's just been a blast for the last couple of years or so. We've learned a lot, and that's what we're all about. So we emphasize a lot of the work in the agriculture vertical and the construction vertical, real estate, solar inspections, infrastructure inspections, all of the above, right? We really try to have a very solid grasp on a number of different projects and use cases, I guess you could say, to support and train our franchisees so that we can capture as many business opportunities as we can. So that's what Blue Nose is all about. Yeah.
Cool. You've actually answered quite a lot of the questions I already had laid out. So yeah, well done. Very, very well done. So I mean, FAA regulations, how would you compare those with the current drone regulations in the US? Obviously it's different here, but how would you compare the FAA regulations, with the drone regulations in the US?
That's a great question.
And can I just add to that? I think it's really interesting, Tana. It will be really, really great to hear your perspective because, as you mentioned, you've got the commercial airline background, and now you're running essentially a franchise in the drone services business, which obviously those two worlds have a lot of overlap. But it's really interesting to hear your perspective on how you find the regulatory environment for those two things, and what are your thoughts on what's working well today, and what could be done better.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something that really from the outset we were paying a lot of attention to because of the fact that so many of us were coming from a professional aviation background, and we understood the transferability of those skill sets. And we knew, okay, we understand performance and meteorology and interfacing with the FAA and that regulatory environment. And, the more that I looked at it, the more that I saw this new and emerging, drone space that was kind of like the Wild West in the US, at least, right? It was like everybody was doing whatever they wanted to do. There weren't really a ton of regulations. That framework was kind of slow to evolve. So that's where we saw an opportunity, right? We'll take our experience and the expectations that we know that the FAA has from a professional aviation standpoint, and then build that into our business model and enable our franchisees to kind of work to that and then exceed that kind of expectation, I think, because in our mind, it's just an inevitability, right? It's just a matter of time before the FAA catches up to, that level of kind of like the regulatory body of say the airline world, like the Part 121 world, and then really makes that and enforces that within the Part 107 world, right? So there's we just think that that's going to be something that's just, like I said, this is inevitable, and I think you're already starting to see that, right? There's, just a few years back, the Part 107 regulations came out, and it was like, oh wow, okay, and now we're talking, type certification and airworthiness requirements of these different drone platforms, and that's, in our mind, is it almost mirrors the regulatory framework from the Part 121 world from decades and decades back, right? So that's where we think that it's really probably going to be follow a very similar trajectory, I think, going forward, and I think you're already starting to see that. So obviously there's technical hurdles, and there's regulatory hurdles. There's also cultural hurdles as well that we talk about a lot. Some people are still like, what are these drones? How is this working? What are they doing over my house? So it always kind of has a tendency to get people a little spun up. But I think in large part there's going to be a lot of overlap. It'll follow a very similar path as kind of the airline regulatory framework. So I think it's pretty fascinating, and so we're trying to get ahead of that, right? And we're trying to standardize our workflows and focus on safety and risk analysis and assessments, and having common manuals and systems in place, so that all of our folks are already operating at that level when the time does come.
Okay, so for our UK viewers and listeners, obviously we have the OA here, or GVC, the Part 107 in America. How well developed is that? Is it constantly changing? Do they change parts of it? As kind of things evolve?
Absolutely, yeah. The Part 107 regs, I think they didn't even come online until, what was it, like 2016, I think 2016, 2017 timeframe. So really it's still a very new body of regulations, and it's changed at least twice since then, and say like the last 6 years or so. So it's a constantly evolving framework, and it's just going to continue to be that way, I think, for all intents and purposes, and everything that we can kind of forecast by what we hear from the FAA and the different advocacy groups and advisors that I think that the FAA is seeking. I think we can only expect it for continual evolution going forward.
The UK regs evolve every 5 minutes.
Oh, really? Pretty frequent. Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
So you're just like barely hanging on. Yeah.
Well, this is it exactly. They do change quite a lot. So Tanner, Blue Nose Aerial, what services do you offer, and to whom?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of it. When we kind of narrow it down, we've primarily focused on the kind of the construction vertical and the agriculture vertical, and then more specialized subsets within them. A lot of it, if you go to our website, bluenoseaerial.com, you'll see like golf course management and precision agriculture, right? So those are specialized subsets within kind of the agriculture vertical. Yep. Same thing from a construction standpoint, or maybe it's better classified as like infrastructure, right? So we look at solar panels, we look at utility inspections, and we also kind of clump commercial and residential real estate into that ballpark as well, just because it's very, very common skills and deliverables that I think are required. So a lot of our clients, in fact, I would say almost all of our clients are other businesses, right? We seldom work with, say, just a specific homeowner. It's not sometimes, absolutely sometimes, but the majority of our work is B2B, business to business transactions. So a lot of them are either looking for, say, marketing content for their website, or they're looking for just data collection on a very wide scale, and they see the benefit in kind of partnering with us because of the fact that we can scale out very quickly and meet their data acquisition standards, and then plug that into our franchise network. So then we've got fingers across kind of the country that can capture data in a number of different verticals very, very quickly. So I think that's one of the unique aspects of our model that I think a lot of other businesses are starting to appreciate and see the value in.
Okay, so as a franchise, how far across the states do you stretch? Are you looking to
coast to coast?
Coast to coast. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you looking to take over?
Got folks in Washington and California and New York and Florida and everywhere in between. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're at just about. We actually just signed our 26th franchise owner in Cleveland, Ohio, just last week. So we're excited to get them up and running. But we've got quite a few folks now, and we're always looking for people to join the team for sure.
That's great that the franchise model works in America. It crazy enough, it really doesn't work here. There have
Why
been
is
a
that?
few.
Why do you think?
I'm not really sure. There's been a few franchise kind of drone setups over the 7 years that I've been doing it, and they've never seemed to work. I don't know why. Franchises in the UK for that kind of model, I know for real estate or that kind of thing, that hasn't worked either. It's really odd, but sounds like you've got the market covered.
Well, yeah, we know everything. We've got all the answers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's always I think there's always a balance there, right? I mean, so much of what I think was kind of a unique opportunity for us is because of the fact that we set up the business model during the pandemic, like right
Yeah.
from the outset of the pandemic. So the whole focus, what we were trying to achieve was to create a very flexible business model that was very affordable as well, right? If we
Okay.
priced it too high, then we would just step on our own feet, right? And
Yeah.
we would never meet our objectives. So we keep it very, very affordable. And then we also, like I said, keep it very flexible for people. And that many of them are full-time employed elsewhere doing, maybe they're working for the airlines, or maybe they're still
Yep.
flying for the military, and many of them do. Others are coming from, completely different backgrounds, and they don't have that aviation experience. So the whole idea is to really enable them to become successful business owners and then diversify their own income as they see fit, right? And then
Of
that's,
course.
I think, the beauty of entrepreneurship is you're your own boss, right? You're answering to the man, and that's the guy in the mirror. So
Indeed.
it's yeah, exactly. So it's for us it makes a lot of sense, and I think if had we gone about it in a more traditional franchising structure, and we had maybe potentially an exorbitant franchise fee, well, obviously we would never,
Yeah.
it wouldn't, the quantity of prospects would be pretty minimal at that point. So
Yeah.
there is a balance there. We obviously want this to be a sustainable venture long term, and we need high caliber franchise owners coming on board who are committed to building a brand and
Yeah.
working with us and working within the system, and really leveraging all of the aspects of that, whether it's our manuals or our training or our subject matter experts or other franchise owners, right? They've been through the gauntlet. They know where the pitfalls are,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of institutional knowledge that they can tap into, and that helps a lot, especially in the early days when they're trying to get their business set up and up and running, get that first client, and then just go from there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Varun, I think you've got a few things you want to ask.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm
ask Tanner?
happy to jump in. So really, I've been listening. So really fascinating, to sort of see commercial airline pilots basically transitioning to being entrepreneurs and starting their own business. And as you mentioned, a lot of skills are transferable. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that is transferable. I guess I'm curious, what are the things that you find are more challenging or kind of difficult to sort of difficult to get grips with in the early days for someone transitioning from commercial airline pilot to drone service franchise owner?
I love it. That question really resonates with me pretty deeply, because as the franchisor, I need to know where people need help, right? I got to be able to provide that support for them. And the good thing is, so many of our franchise owners are coming from an aviation background, and they're great operators. They understand airspace, and they're safe, and they know meteorology and performance and the FAA. And so there's a great background in the kind of that foundational knowledge base that they have already. But in the same token, if you flip it, a lot of times they might not know much about, say, GIS or photography and videography or mapping, or, some of the more technical aspects of the drone services space, and kind of just remote sensing, broadly speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's an opportunity for me to provide support for them, right? And that's where our subject matter experts in particular, we have a GIS scientist on board. We also have a videographer on board as well, right? So one of the things that we talk about is, not only do we provide them with the Blue Nose Academy for their initial training and onboarding, and that's really more designed kind of in the post Part 107 certification. So they've already got that certificate in their back pocket. Now it's, well, now what, right? What do I do with this? How do I become a profitable business owner? So that's really where the Blue Nose Academy starts. But that academy was built by our subject matter expert teams, right? Our GIS scientists, our videographer in particular. So we focus on, vegetation indices and thermography and camera settings and, videography and just like typical footage, that you might want to capture on site. Whereas, some of that we really speak to kind of the fundamentals of photography. And we encourage them, and we want to get our franchise owners to the point where they're able to not only compose good photographs from the drone, but also edit those photographs in post-production as well. From a videography standpoint, that's a bit more involved, right? Like there's hardware requirements, there's software requirements, there's a real skill set there. And that's where, our videographer can come into the mix and provides direct support one-on-one for our franchisees. Likewise, from a GIS perspective, hey, if they're getting into orthomosaic mapping or 3D modeling or, facade inspections or whatever it might be, then we can plug them straight into our GIS. We call him our drone doctor. So he's providing a lot of that technical support directly for the franchise owner. So there's real, it's a huge value add for folks to just, hey, come on board. We're going to provide a very streamlined workflow for you. Already, clients that are established for you to leverage, but as well, on top of that, we've got, a subject matter expert team there for you to leverage whenever you need to. So that's, anyways, long story short, to answer your question, I feel like a lot of our franchise owners are coming from an aviation background. So they've got that real, that solid skill set, but they might not quite understand how to piece it all together in the long run and really make sense of that data, right? We oftentimes talk about, data capture is one thing. It's about, I would say 70% of the solution, and we've got to get to 100%. And that last remaining 30% is the analysis of that, right? Analysis of that data. That's really where the value lies. And that's what you guys do so great at Hammer Missions. It's a critical component of our entire workflow is to be able to provide that level of support and technical software for our franchisees to really meet that 100% solution.
Yeah, no, that's a great analysis. I think it's so often the case that people get into the drone industry because it's got so many aspects to it that are really attractive to anyone that is, living in the world of technology, whether it's sort of flying hardware, whether it's these high quality sensors. And flying is an essential part of it. But as you mentioned, the data, drones are very much a data business because at the end of the day, the end customer, they're looking to answer some critical question, whether it's, someone in construction trying to understand what their site looks like, or whether it's someone in infrastructure trying to figure out defects. And so I think you've articulated really well that there is the flying side, but we must not forget the data side. And that's where the GIS and sort of subject matter experts can really help in.
It's as we always say, isn't it? The drone is literally a tool. It's a tool for the industry. It's what you do with that tool that makes the difference, whether it be filming or photography, data capture. It's what you do with it that counts.
I think you're totally right. Sometimes we refer to it as a flying ham sandwich, right? It's like, what are we going to do with this, right? There's a real need to make sense of that data in a very smart and efficient and affordable way. If you're only out there just capturing the data and you don't know what to do with it after the fact, don't think you're going to be terribly successful in the long run, right? So a lot of times in the airline world, we kind of refer to this as shiny jet syndrome. They're like, oh, look at that, there's a new jet, the latest and greatest technology. But it's like, well, don't be distracted by the shiny jet syndrome, right? It's like drones are fascinating. There's so much cool stuff going on, and the technology is just evolving weekly, right? But man, at some point, you still got to be able to provide value for those clients, and that's always something that you've got to have in the back of your mind, right? You can't just be out there just I'm flying around doing my thing. It's important to understand how to tie it all together.
Indeed it is
100%. Yeah. And so, talking about the sort of the data capture part, or even the analysis part, are there some specific missions or projects that you recall that were particularly sort of challenging or thorny, or you just there was no clear solution on how to do this? I'm just curious if there's any anecdotes or anything you remember, from the last 3 years that have been that stands out as a project or as a as a task that you really had to sort of upskill and kind of deliver.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There's always, I think there's room for improvement no matter what we're doing, right? There's always ways to make things better, to streamline it, to make it more flexible, to make it affordable for our clients. But one thing I do think of, when you frame it like that is within within agriculture in particular, there's so many different things that you could be focusing on, and not all of those deliverables are necessary for all clients, right? So if we're looking at, say, crop health, that's one thing. Or is this, a nutrient deficiency, or is there, some type of disease, occurring in this quadrant of the field, whatever it might be. There's a lot that we can do with, say, multispectral sensors, right? And understanding kind of the science behind the health of a crop. That said, I think there's also a lot to be said for, just data capture and almost how can we then implement some of these machine learning concepts into this as well, right? Just using RGB sensors, right? I think there's a lot there. There's a lot of value in that space. And primarily, we work with a company called Spectrobotics here in Colorado, and they're a partnership of ours. And that's really what they're focused on is implementing machine learning concepts within, this data capture space, and how to then provide that level of analysis that we've been talking about more from a quantitative standpoint, right? And understanding, hey, there's some there's value here in the numbers, but there's also a lot of value here in anomaly detection, right? And that's where these machine learning models can do just tremendous things. And I almost, I'm curious to see if we can really get that up and running and really start building that into our workflow. How we can kind of build out that model and not just look at it from a spectral analysis, but also, start looking into the artificial intelligence and machine learning space and really trying to provide some value in that space. That's one of the things that's so far has been somewhat elusive for us. It's challenging. It takes time to get that. Obviously, as you're probably well aware, it takes a ton of data as well, right? I mean, the models are only as good as we build them and train them. So you need to have a lot of data, and you've got to have data that's qualifiable too, right? That, hey, we know that this set of data has anomalies here, and here. So that requires a level of expertise and understanding of that data beforehand. And then we can train the models after the fact too. So, I don't know if that answers your question a whole, 100%, but it's one of the things that for us, we're kind of focusing on, and we can do that in the ag space. We can do this also in the roof inspection space as well, and facade inspections. The same basic analysis, the same concepts are applied, and they're transferable, right? It is anomaly detection, and how we can do that with, preferably an RGB sensor, right? Because that's what's going to, it's one of the barriers to entry for a lot of drone entrepreneurs, right? Is the cost of the sensors. So if we can minimize that and try to eliminate some of those barriers to entry, and then provide them with sophisticated models to then become, successful in their own right, I think that's a win for us. So we'll see. That's more to come on that. That's probably where 2023 will lie for us, at least in the first few months or so.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Oh, no, that sounds really amazing. And you're exactly right. I think with all the machine learning applications, firstly, there's just so many applications in the drone world, and then you need to have all sorts of data and a large quantity of highly labeled data, good data as well, to be able to train those algorithms to find these things. But at the same time, it feels amazing, the fact that we're kind of progressing so quickly year on year. We're able to kind of get so much more value out of these flying machines. I mean, I just wonder what things are going to look like in 5, 7, 10 years time. I
mean, can you imagine thinking back 10 years ago, what's possible now with automated aircraft? I mean, it's fairly mind blowing, really.
Yeah,
it wasn't
absolutely
10 years ago.
Sorry. Right. Yeah. 10 years ago, it was like, wow, there's a camera on a drone, and people's minds were just exploding. Right. And now it's like, well, there's 6 cameras on that drone. Right. And there's just so much more that can be done. And as far as the automation of flight and these workflows and the data analysis, I mean, there's just so much more value that's occurred in such a brief amount of time. The technology is quickly outpacing the regulatory framework, and I mentioned it earlier too, some of those cultural hurdles as well, right? It's like, ooh, how are we making sense of this, and how are we ensuring that the public feels, hey, we're protecting their privacy and we're respecting them, and kind of threading the needle a little bit throughout all of that stuff. So there's a real balance there.
I was actually out flying earlier, and I got shouted at over the fence from where I was flying behind me. Safe road. was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not even going to answer that because I can't even see who it is. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, the cultural change, it will happen. It is slowly happening already. People are becoming acceptant of, and flying kit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it takes time, but yeah, I think people are becoming more and more used to it for sure.
Yeah. And it's always the same questions as well. Is that a drone?
Is it a drone? No, it's a flying sock.
It's a flying ham sandwich. That's right.
Yeah, it's a flying ham sandwich. Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But Sana, so I think the cultural side of things is definitely a challenge, and I think that's something that we definitely as a community have to resolve. What would you say are, from a macroscopic point of view, still challenges in the industry that we have to address? More kind of working together, that sort of have to be enabled through partnerships or people speaking to people more, working together more. Because as Alex just pointed out, it is very much a 10-year-old industry, give or take. So that means there's a lot more challenges, but it also means opportunity. I guess, that's how entrepreneurs look at it. So I'm just curious, kind of, what you think are kind of sort of macroscopic challenges in the industry that we all have to sort of work together.
I think you already nailed it, right? I think you hit it right on the head when you talked about, the ability to work together, whether that's, in collaboration with your teammates internally to your organization, or whether that's developing partnerships with other entities. I think there's a lot of room for that. And that's, again, to kind of come back to our model. That's really where we focus tremendously on is building together, right? That's one of our core values, is build together. It's never adversarial, right? It's not like, hey, you're on this side of the city and I'm on this side, and we're bumping elbows or something like that. It's never the case. It's always the fact that we're working together. We're swapping equipment, we're swapping knowledge. We're sometimes, other franchise owners are picking up clients that the other franchise owner might not be able to service, right? So from a service provider standpoint, I think absolutely there's real room for growth in the collaboration of what it is that we do, not only internal to what Blue Nose does, but then beyond that, and developing those partnerships. Because, man, I tell you, the first thing that one of the things that we say too is like, hey, there's the largest room in my house is the room for improvement, right? And so we never have all of the answers, right? We don't have all of them ever, and we never will, right? So it's important to understand that and be, exercise that level of humility, and then reach out to people that do have those answers, right? Because the more that we can do that, the more relationships that we can build, the bigger network that we can provide our franchise owners to leverage, that just provides all of those solutions for them. So I think collaboration is a huge part of it, and that's not only from the private sector, but also within academia, within government applications, within nonprofits as well. There's so much room for that type of collaboration, and that's one of the things that we focus on a lot.
Brilliant. I think speaking of collaboration and partnerships, I was just wondering, do you recall, like, how did you come across Hammer Missions the first time? We're just thinking, because it's been a couple of years we've been talking, but
Farron can't remember.
Right.
I mean, I remember we started talking, but it was it might have been on LinkedIn. I can't remember, but it was something sparked a discussion, and then we were basically talking.
Well, it's when I think when I first came across you guys, was actually our drone doctor, our GIS scientist that I had mentioned earlier. He was already using the Hammer Missions app. So I met him on site. He was doing a project here in Denver, and I was like, what are you using over there, right? Because you've got the larger players that have been around for a long time, and a lot of times they're very, very expensive, right? And so that is a threshold that a lot of people just can't really overcome sometimes. And sometimes they're not quite technical enough either, right? So I was looking at his app. I was like, what do we got here? And he was showing me, he's like, all these pre-built missions and how we can do facade inspections and towers and mapping and all that. I'm like, man, that's like ideal for what we're doing. It's a perfect complement to the type of services that we're trying to provide. So yeah, he was the one who introduced me to it, and that's when I reached out to you. And I think that was year and a half ago, maybe, I think, originally.
Yeah.
It's been a while, for sure, but yeah, it's gone by quickly. But I think that was it. he's so plugged. Jason is his name. He's so plugged into the industry, and that's what he did in the Air Force. Years back as well. So he was a GIS scientist in the Air Force. He's been in the commercial drone space for, I think, basically since it started. The last 9 or 10 years or so. So he's really well versed. He's got a ton of experience, and so I was looking, at kind of his operation. I was like, wow, we got to reach out and see if we can get this integrated within Blue Nodes for sure. So that's how we first found out about you.
Oh, brilliant.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. No, I recall Jason. Yeah. And he's very knowledgeable and, very excited about all the tech that has come so far and the tech that's coming. So, it's great. That's great. Good to sort of understand the sort of, the beginnings and the story of sort of like how things came to be. Do you remember what caught his attention, or what he was using it for? Or, was it a mix of different things, or was it something specific?
Yeah, it was. He was actually the map. Well, he was. The project was a hotel actually. So they wanted obviously just a lot of data capture, just normal photos, but they also were looking for orthomosaic maps and facade inspections as well, I believe. At the time. So he was like, well, let me try out Hammer Missions and get an idea of how this could work. And I was like, wow, this is really just very, very well suited for this type of mission, right? And what we do pretty often, like I said earlier, so much of our clients are other businesses, right? So it's B2B sales more often than not. So looking at that and how it was broken down in a nice kind of organized and neat fashion with these pre-built missions, I was like, man, this is perfect. So yeah, he was doing a number of different things, not just photos and just kind of capturing a bunch of them, but mapping as well, three-dimensional modeling too. So yeah, it was really ideal for that project. So I was impressed from the get-go.
Oh, nice.
Cool. It's good to know.
That's very good to know. And has the and I know we've been speaking, so I imagine that the use of Hammer Missions from then to now has probably evolved. Do you see more things being utilized since then, more specific types of missions or types of data being processed? Just curious, kind of like, have you seen the usage evolve, or if you've seen kind of different types of missions being used?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we're focusing on, and we're seeing a bit more attention given, I think, by our franchise owners, is really the solar inspection space. We've done a few of those in the past. Several of our franchise owners down in Florida have done quite a bit of work in that space. So we're looking at that and not only solar inspections, but also utility inspections as well. There's so much volume out there, right? And it's regular data capture requirements that are necessary. So, for us, that means sustainability, that means long-term growth, developing together. So we look, I think that's probably where we're going to see a lot of growth at Blue Nose is kind of in that the energy sector, if you will, as well as the ag side of things, right? We've always been pretty closely aligned with the agriculture world, and we're starting to see a lot of emphasis on that as well. We've got a couple great clients that have turned into national accounts of ours that our franchise owners are then able to service as well. So I think agriculture and energy in particular are probably where we're going to be focusing on quite a bit going forward.
Right, interesting. And how do you think that how the kind of our partnership might evolve, given that these clients are coming on board? Are there specific ways you think in which we could potentially work closer together, better together? Yeah, I always wonder about this question as well in the back of my mind. So I thought maybe the podcast is a great place to sort of ask this question. What can we do better?
It's funny because, well, a couple different things come to mind, right? And one, I think you've got a great tiered structure in the services that you have, right? And whether enabling our franchise owners to pick and choose between those different tiers to meet their own business requirements is critically important always, right? So I want to make sure that they've at least got access to, some type of baseline foundational software that they can leverage, because truly a lot of them are they've not seen something like this before, right? It's such brand new technology. They're coming from, the airline background, and they're like, well, what do we know? It's kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's like, I understand how to fly this drone, but I don't know how to make sense of this data. So enabling them from the get-go is critically important, and then giving them the opportunity to upgrade as necessary, even more so, right? That's so growing together in that same vein, right? Collaboration together is a big piece of it as well. And one of the other things, kind of on a separate note, that we always love is working with companies, directly. Right. I mean, one-on-one, right? We can provide you with that type of feedback, and then make the model better and make it, obviously, hopefully leverage that more fully and completely within Bluenose. But hopefully that's also helping you guys develop your platform as well, right? So having that type of partnership one-on-one, where we can speak directly to you and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Is this possible to make that happen? That's huge, right? And when you deal with other, just say other software providers that are huge and expensive and, just a large entity, you're never going to get that, right? It's just not something they're like, okay, well, hey, get in line, man. Here's the bill, and that for us, that's not what we want to. That's just not who we choose to do business with, right? We want to work with other companies who are going to be, partners with us, and we're going to grow together. So that's those two aspects. I think the scalability of your platform, and then also the ability to provide feedback and then improve that for all of us. I think those are two core fundamentals of what we really truly appreciate about your partnership.
We like to feel we've got the personal touch.
Yeah,
that's what we like.
Yeah,
you can just get in touch with us. It's fine. Right. Anytime. So what's the next big thing then for Bluenose Aerial? Your next big thing.
The next big thing, we exhibited at the Commercial UAV Expo in Las Vegas last year, and that was huge for us, right? That was just tremendous. It was the first time that we had an opportunity to do that. So we're definitely going to do that again in 2023. Really, our long-term goal is to have a franchise owner in every state and every major city in the United States. And then, every now and then we'll get some interest overseas as well, right? We've had a number of folks in Canada reach out to us, some in Australia, some throughout Europe, right? So we're kind of looking at, how can we bridge that and cross that threshold in a very sustainable manner that's not going to, bankrupt the company either. So, there's some real balances there. So we look at, more comprehensive expansion within the U.S., potentially into, the international space as well. That's probably a few years down the line, I think, to, just realistically speaking. But a lot of what we're focused on now is that I think that, we've got a franchise package that really hits just about every wicket, right? I mean, whether it's Part 107 certification prep, whether that's, training in our Bluenose Academy, whether that's, branding and marketing and advertising campaigns, developing the businesses for our franchise owners to leverage for their own benefit, all the way to national accounts, right? So the national accounts piece is critically important, because so often we get this question, hey, why would I join Bluenose if I can just do this on my own?
Yeah.
It's a totally valid question. Absolutely, right? It's not necessarily rocket science, but it does take time to be an entrepreneur, right? It takes time, it takes energy, it takes resources, it takes money as well, right? So, much of what we want to be able to say is, well, here's why you should join Bluenose, right? We've got the training, we've got the equipment, we've got the partnerships, and we've also got clients for you ready. That's a big deal for us. So if we can provide that type of end-to-end solution for them to really get their business up and running and profitable as quickly as we can, that's a big part of it. So national accounts is going to be a huge piece going forward, and more comprehensive expansion throughout the country.
I know that's what a lot of kind of early part drone pilots suffer with, is they've got all the kit, they've got the knowledge, they know what they're doing. How do they get their customers?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
A lot of people do suffer with that. So how do you see the drone industry evolving then? How's what's the future for the drone industry, do you think?
Yeah, man, I love that question, and it's I feel like as soon as I got a good answer for it, it just changes, right? So I'm like, man, we're just constantly adapting. So, I think at least here in the States, I can speak to that, and I think what we're seeing is the evolution of the quality of not only the data, but also who's capturing that data. And are they certified, and are they trained, and are they doing this the right way? Are they providing a high level of customer service in a very professional manner? So I think that's where it's generally trending. And so what we see, I think, is that two things are happening, right? Like, larger corporate entities are either kind of taking the plunge and bringing on board, drone pilots or their own, team of pilots to capture their data and meet those requirements
in-house
for them. Yeah, in-house, exactly, right? So in-house operations. And then I think conversely, many companies are like, hey, we don't want to do that. That's not our bread and butter, right? We don't want to get wrapped up into that. So they're then looking for outsourcing options, and that's where Blue Nose I think is really really well suited for that. So they can find a company that can scale out in a very professional and high quality manner that's standardized throughout the country. So, or at least that's what I like to tell myself, right? So so that's how we position ourselves in the industry. So I think you're seeing kind of the natural evolution of a higher quality operation. I think and that looks like a number of different ways, kind of like what I was alluding. But I think that's where it's going. I'm very very interested to see how the advanced air mobility space kind of evolves, how drone delivery evolves, how we're going to meet some of these challenges from a technical perspective as well as a regulatory balance. So I think that'll be interesting. I think there's a lot of eyes on especially the drone delivery space and what that looks like, and how we can achieve that. So who knows? But I do think all of this is the baseline is just a better level of operation, right? A more professional operation, and that's going to support any of these endeavors that we're talking about. So I think that's kind of ties back to what we were saying earlier in terms of, where are the Part 107 regulations in the US from the FAA's perspective? Where are they at? How are they evolving? Are they meeting the demands of the private sector? And so that's where I think, we're paying very close attention to how we can achieve this. We talk a lot of times about beyond visual line of sight waivers and that process and how really very burdensome that was in the very early days. We're seeing that become more efficient right now, right? Like that process is becoming something that's not so unreachable for some folks, right? So that'll be interesting to see how we can streamline that workflow and then build that into the operation. I think just broadly speaking,
it's slowly happening here as well. They're pushing the boundaries of how far you can take that aircraft and where it can go. They are pushing that here, and you've got a lot of there's a lot of pilots trying to back that idea and pushing the CAA towards making that decision. It'll happen sooner or later. I guess
it's coming.
FAA.
Takes time.
So it does take time. It will take a while. So what sort of advice would you have for someone starting out in the industry? I mean, being the entrepreneur and airline pilot that you are, what advice would you give a newbie, so to speak?
One of the things that having come from a military aviation background and really no experience in entrepreneurship up until just a few years ago, one of the conversations that I will never forget was a very close family friend of ours, and he was kind of like a serial entrepreneur, right? And he's done this, and he dove over here and did some of this, and one of the things that when I kind of presented him the idea of a drone services franchise, he said, hey, this is all great. I think this is a unique model, but there's riches and niches, right? You've got to be able to specialize. So I think, if I were to give one piece of advice to somebody starting off in the drone services space, is to make that deep dive, specialize, right? Develop your own niche down, right? And do it better than anybody else, right? If you can, like, get to that point where your level of knowledge is better, your professionalism is better, you're providing customer service that's unparalleled, and then really bang the drum on that over and over and over again, because what we see now is just thousands and thousands of operators out there who are kind of just lone wolves, right? Like they're working by themselves, and that's again kind of tying it back to the opportunities for collaboration. There's so much there, right? And so, okay, we can't just have this dispersed model of service. It needs to be a bit more structured, and it's got to be more professional, and it's got to be always focused on providing that value for the client in whatever pillar or vertical that they're working in. So I would say, there's riches and niches. Be ready to specialize.
It's funny. The last two guests we've had on, that was the answer to that question as well.
Oh, no kidding, really.
Specialize is paramount, really, isn't it? You need to specialize in something. You can't be a jack of all trades in the drone industry. Well, you can,
I think,
but you're better off specializing in a particular subject and sticking with that. So, Tanner, if someone, if someone wants to get hold of you, what's the best way to contact yourself at Blue Nose Aerial or Blue Nose Aerial in general?
yeah, just our website's the best spot. So that's www.bluenoseaerial.com. And that'll go right into my inbox. So if you send in a submission form, that's coming right to my phone. So I'll get a hold of you real quick that way. So that's really probably the best way. We're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the standard social media platforms. We're out there as well. But yeah, the website's probably the best way to go.
Cool. Excellent. I mean, Varun, do you have any more questions at all?
No, it's great. Tanner, I just want to thank you for being with us this week. It's been amazing and really, really interesting to hear about your journey, kind of, transitioning, from the aviation world to, still in the aviation world, with the drone aviation world, and now helping others do that. And I think that's sort of like a complete cycle. So thanks so much for spending the time with us today. And I'm keen to sort of see how our partnership also sort of develops over the next few months and years. And if you are expanding to the UK, well, who to tap up, because we'd be more than happy to, when that time comes, to sort of help you out the UK side of things.
Absolutely. No, like I said, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always a blast working with you guys. It's great to reconnect. And, thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. It's been great. We usually top the podcast off with a little bit about us. So you can reach us at team@hammermissions.com. We're available on YouTube. If you've got any comments, pop them in the comments section below, and we'll get back to you. We're also available on an audio podcast as well, which is available on all your good podcast directories. And I think that is pretty much it for this week. Again, thank you so much, Tanner. Appreciate your time today. It's been great, and thank you, Varun, for joining us as well. And first guest Varun has been with.
Yes, there we go. And thanks, Alex, for organising. So that's amazing.
Pleasure. No problem at all.
Yeah, and looking forward to doing this again.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Cheers. Thanks, all. Cheers, Tanner. Thanks, Varun. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.